A very warm welcome to everyone. Rose is on for a second to say hello to everyone. Rose is doing like tech support and she will answer your questions. I also will again stay on for at least a few minutes afterwards and potentially be able to follow up with some more information for you. So if you see the chat box on the right hand side at the bottom, you can enter a chat, you can enter questions, you can enter comments. If you'd start with saying where you're from and even one thing you're excited to hear about today, that'd be fantastic. So this is officially the start then of our second interview, and I'm so excited to have Dr. John Gray coming on. Just before we introduce him, a couple things. First off, if you're brand new to the community, welcome. I'm so excited that you've joined us. This is actually our 6th year, and it is amazing the transformation that happens with the repetition of listening to these interviews, and 2 interviews a week over 3 months is really profound. We cover a wide variety of topics. So you're in the right place, whether you started as I did, as really a parenting disaster, or whether you're already a good parent and you just are a great parent even, and you know, though, that the world has changed so much that you need to parent differently in order to stay on top of things. I do want to make, well, one tech note. So I mentioned the chat that by all means start, introduce yourself, say one of the top things that you'd like to know from today's interview. That'd be fantastic. I also want to make the tech note that if our software uses Google Hangouts, when I was interviewed on Huffington Post Live, I was quite surprised a couple of years back that they also used Hangouts. So it really, and since then, of course, gotten even more stable. It's a great platform. And like any technology, there's always a chance of a catastrophic fail. So if that happens, then by all means, stay tuned, because what will happen is in the chat box, this exact broadcast will end. I'll have to start a new one, and in the chat box, I can put the link. So it could take a couple minutes, but we won't be far. Huge kudos to you for being here. Whether it's live, which we have a very small number relatively who come live, but it's fantastic if you carve out this time and make it urgent. First off, there's so much energy that comes with being live, and you shape the call really by your comments and questions, and you particularly shape the Q&A afterwards that I've started offering this year for the first time. But also that urgency is so critical. Okay, fantastic. Dr. Gray is here. So I'm just about to introduce him, which is fantastic. I do want to emphasize, as I always do, to take what you like and leave the rest. But yet, of course, at the same time, when we've got someone like Dr. John Gray, multiple best-selling author who's really done so much to transform relationships, then of course you want to hear what he has to say and his wisdom. So Dr. John Gray, I'm just about to do an introduction. I'm not sure if we hear you either, but if you want to say something, we can make sure that we can hear you, and we don't yet see your video. That's the only thing.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
You bet. We hear you loud and clear. And
I'll continue trying to get my video up.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. And I'll start with the introduction. And wonderful. In the meantime, we have people introducing themselves, and do by all means. I love, like Ruth, for example, is talking about she wants to hear the different ways to support girls and boys. You're in the right place. It's perfect. So a few things that I want to say about Dr. John Gray. His topic today is Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, Children Are From Heaven. And that's the title of one of his many fantastic books. How to dramatically improve all the relationships in your family. I profoundly have been influenced by his work, and he is just so incredible, both for the co-parenting piece as well as for what you're doing with your children. Dr. John Gray is the highly acclaimed, multiple best-selling author of the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus series. He helps men and women understand, respect, and appreciate our differences in both personal and professional relationships. His approach combines specific communication techniques with healthy nutritional choices that create the brain and body chemistry for lasting health, happiness, and romance. And he has numerous books, videos, workshops, and seminars provide practical, hands-on insights to effectively manage stress and improve relationships at all stages of your life. And wonderful. We see you now as well, Dr. Joan Gray. I just wanted to add one last thing to the introduction is that I had the pleasure of attending a workshop with him. I just highly recommend his work, and you can find out more information at marsvenus.com. Rose, if you can enter that, especially for any English as a second language listeners, marsvenus.com, if you can enter that in the chat box. Thank you very much. So welcome so much back to the Great Parenting Show with Dr. Gray.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. We see you wonderfully, so it's great.
Terrific. I'm really happy to be joining you in this webinar. Thank you.
Well, your interview that we did, the last time I did a big series like this, you were on it a few years back, and it is one of the most requested interviews, and I constantly hear from women especially who are saying like their eyes just get so opened, and seeing things differently makes it so much easier to parent differently as well as co-parent differently. So I'd like to start with asking my experts, what got you started in this in the first place?
Well, ironically, I have a very unusual background. I was a celibate monk for 9 years, and my brother was bipolar, so I decided to try to help him, and went back to school and studied psychology and discovered that I had a really good talent for helping people improve their relationships. I got into parenting when I had kids, but even before I had kids, I got into parenting simply because I was doing classes for children who were having challenges. And also I was in my own psychology practice studying NLP at that time. So much of our behavior in present time had to do with wounds from the past. So already I had a sense of, okay, what's happened to people that are unhappy as adults? What happened in their childhood? And can we correct that as parents so those things don't happen? Then I had my own children, 3 daughters, and they've turned out great. And so I wrote a book called Children Are From Heaven, expressing many of the positive ideas that I put into the parenting journey.
Fantastic. And so today I want to cover both. I already mentioned your book title, and really highly recommend people. It's like a 300-page book, very extensive and great insights. I would like to start with your Mars Venus work in terms of couples, because I know you talk so much about how important it is for parenting that we handle our romantic relationships, whether we're single parents or not single parents. So can we start there?
That's a great place to start, particularly because I think every parent inherently loves their children, and love is the most important thing. And part of the challenges children have is when mom and dad are not happy or fulfilled with each other. A little girl learns her self-esteem to a great extent by her mother's self-esteem, but also how does her father treat her mother. A little boy develops his self-esteem by being with his parents who have good self-esteem, but also how does the mother tend to regard the father? Or if they're not married, how does the mother still regard the father? Or how does the mother regard a man in her life? And that brings us to a second point that I think is very important about our love life, in that we as human beings have different needs. And a child's need at that stage of life is for the parent to take care of the child, not for the child to take care of the parent. If a child is put in that much responsibility, it will cause a sense of insecurity. Just as if I asked you to build a skyscraper or a bridge, you'd feel suddenly insecure because you're not ready for that. The child will attempt to let's take an example of a mother who is not happy in her marriage and a divorce happens, and then she feels guilty because her child needs more attention than because a parent is missing. So the tendency is to try to give more to the child, and that child, their tendency will try to give more to that mother because there are unmet needs in her. It's not like the child is going to fulfill her romantic needs, but as an adult, we have needs for intimacy and sharing, and that type of intimacy and equal sharing is inappropriate with a child. For example, I would not want to say to my child, I'm really afraid I'm not going to be able to pay the mortgage, or, you don't tell your children those things because they go, what, we're going to have to move, and but you would share that with an intimate partner. So there's things that children are not privy to, just as your sex life and so forth. And even our romantic needs, our sexual needs as well, as adults are very important, particularly in our 30s and 40s. I think it's like really, really important. And if those needs are not being met, there's a void. Now, the child doesn't know what that void is, but the child will try to make mom happy. And for little boys, I've seen with grown-up men, often they can't make a commitment in life because they feel like they're never able to fully make a woman happy. Because as children, they weren't able to make their mother happy when that's not their job, to fulfill all her needs, so to speak. And likewise with a father could be the same thing. So it's important, the summation of that is if you're single after a divorce and you have children, it's important that you also take time away from your children to create romance in your life. Just as if you're a married couple, you need to take time away from your children to create romance, because that's a need. And if that need doesn't get fulfilled, children end up feeling a greater pressure to fulfill. That doesn't mean they're always going to be good either. One type of child will try to be overly good. Another type of child will try and feel like they can't succeed and then go the other direction. Like, who cares? I'm not going to bother. I'll find other ways to find fulfillment than making my parents happy.
That is just so groundbreaking, and so I think just a wake-up call, because as moms in so many cases and dads, we don't necessarily put our romantic relationship, in fact, I think it's rare, right, to put that as priority.
You know, the irony is, let's look at our needs as human beings. How much fulfillment we gained by finding a romantic partner. It was a tremendous issue in our life. And then our children come along, and they are there, they fulfill another need that we have as human beings, which is to give love unconditionally. But just because, and that's a very, very fulfilling thing, to just care for your children and opens your heart in new ways. But it doesn't mean that you still don't have the need for the romantic love, just as we have the need for education, to be learning and growing, just as we have the need to feel fun, just as we have the need to have an independent life. These are all needs that human beings have, and as we become more complex, meaning we get older and more mature, we have to learn to balance all those needs. And one of the challenges in relationships is when we forego our needs for intimacy and focusing on our children's needs, because that's so appealing, because your children are just giving you so much love back. It's just amazing. At that point, we neglect ourselves of other needs. As a result, fatigue sets in, exhaustion sets in. Our mind tends to overly focus on the child's needs rather than on our own needs and other needs in our life. And that's something we have to remember. And I guess I'm drawn to say one other thing here. There's one for married couples and one for divorced couples, because so many people have, divorced families today. And I've seen again and again and again that mothers or fathers will be afraid to get involved romantically with somebody else, go out on dates and whatever, because they're afraid of what their children will feel. Because typically when there's a divorce, children do not fully grieve the divorce, because it's a breakup, it's a loss. Every child wants mom and dad to be happy together. It's a biological need inside. They all want that. And when we do classes for kids and what makes you happy, they draw pictures of rainbows and hearts and mom and dad and family holding hands. This is such a basic need for community of little children. So when mom and dad break up, there's always this little wish inside that they'll come back together, the hope they'll come back together. And so when you get a divorce, often the children deal with it okay until you start dating. That's when the children start to grieve the process. And grieving a process, a breakup, is an important part of the growth process. So, parents are afraid to take care of their own needs because now the children are going to be very upset and throw tantrums and whatever. And what do you do at those times? It's this basic skill every parent needs to know how to teach a child. The most important skill of growing up, besides feeling loved, is delayed gratification. Is that you can't have what you want when you want it. If you don't get it when you want it, doesn't mean you can't ever get it, or that you can't get something else that will provide what you need. And so that's the emotional tantrum. So we don't give in to emotional tantrums and change our behavior if our behavior is appropriate, but we can give a child the understanding the empathy and the ability to transform those turbulent emotions back into peace and love, and that would be from the place of identifying what are those emotions. I know you're angry, I know you're frustrated, you're probably afraid that you're not going to see me for a while, and mom and dad will never get back together, and that's true, we won't, but we will always be friends, and we will have time with daddy, you will have time with mommy, we love you, we're family. You just have to slowly bring these ideas again and again, but you have to always honor the emotions and help identify what those emotions are. That tends to help heal the heart of the shock of mom and dad breaking up.
I just love that you're talking about this. And so to broaden it again, because I think it's so critical, you talked about the divorced and single parents, because that's huge. In either case, you're saying that making a priority of romance will actually de-stress the woman. Is that a correct synopsis? And can you talk more about that? Because I know that the stress levels that women feel as we're plowing everything into our kids, and I'm sure men have an equivalent, can cause us to push romance away.
Oh, that's the irony, is you can't feel romantic, for women particularly, you can't feel romantic, generally speaking, okay, you can't say everybody's exactly the same, but generally speaking for women, to feel romantic and to experience that openness, there's a biological basis of that. And the biological basis of that is an abundance of a hormone called oxytocin and a hormone estrogen. So if your estrogen levels are low, it's very hard to open up and be receptive to receive in an intimate way, or even to feel that need, for example. So estrogen has to be in its right place, as well as oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is the key factor. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone, it's the trust hormone, and it's also the hormone that allows a woman to be sexually responsive, romantically open. And to get to that place, and the irony here is that when women have sufficient levels of oxytocin and estrogen, it lowers their stress levels. And that was a huge breakthrough in terms of insight about 15 years ago. Lots of books are now written on it. Oxytocin has been such an important hormone for lowering stress levels for women. Now, there are a few men who do run low in oxytocin, but it's not very common. Oxytocin only is utilized to lower stress if you have high estrogen levels. Men typically don't have high estrogen levels, so oxytocin doesn't lower a man's stress. But what lowers a man's stress is feeling successful. Men have a different mechanism in their brain, which is a turn-off switch. A man can work hard and then feel tired, and he can literally turn off his brain quite easily. It takes some practice, but he can do it. And when he turns off his brain, his stress level goes down, and he relaxes his muscles. Then it rebuilds testosterone, and testosterone is the hormone of success for men. Whenever men feel they can accomplish or achieve or be successful, testosterone goes up. But when it goes up, it becomes depleted. So men run out of testosterone, they have to rebuild it. And that's why, you know, this is one of the popular ideas of Men Are From Mars, is that men go to their cave, which is a man could love his family, love his wife, but he comes home and he will feel this need to just sort of isolate himself. He will detach. He will tend to withdraw in a variety of different ways, whether it be watching the news, reading the news, going into garage, having a hobby, meditating, doing yoga, whatever these things are, exercising. He needs to forget his problems. So men have a much easier time just forgetting their problems. Their stress goes down, then their hormone levels can come back up into balance. Women don't have that shut-off switch, and they've shown this in studies. If a woman sits down at the end of the day on a couch and measure her brain activity, it actually speeds up. And you can ask her, what is she thinking? And she's thinking about all the things she should be doing that she's not doing. Now, women can let go of it all, but they need oxytocin to do it, which is why you'll often see kind of like the fantasy for women is to relax in a spa. Well, what happens at a spa is somebody's, you know, you're having touch, non-sexual touch, for example, a massage produces huge amounts of oxytocin. Being in a situation where there's not problems to solve, but everybody's doing the same thing, produces oxytocin. Whenever women feel that they're not alone, oxytocin gets produced. I was just going for a walk yesterday morning, and school just started, and I noticed all the women in Mill Valley where I live, after dropping off their kids, not all, but lots of them, were all together talking and sharing, and they're in their exercise. They're going to go for their walks then and get their time in to do a little work in self-nurturing. And these are lucky women who don't have to rush off to a job right away. It's just so important that women find time to be with other women where they're not trying to make money. That's and why do I say that, make money? Because when you're making money, you're basically, if it's a job and you have to make decisions and the outcome is based upon your decisions, the hormone testosterone is produced. Now, there's nothing wrong with testosterone except that when testosterone goes high in a woman, her estrogen levels go low. And for women, her whole stress mechanism is based upon estrogen and oxytocin to regulate stress. Whereas for a man, his regulation of stress is he needs to have healthy testosterone levels, particularly, and low levels of estrogen. So we're kind of opposites in that way, and having good relationship skills can help to balance those hormones. So when it comes to educating men, I explain to men, little things make a big difference to produce oxytocin. Oxytocin, if I hold my wife's hand, if I give her a hug, if I compliment her, if I help her with something, if I offer to support her, if she says something that upsets me, if I just stop talking, which is so important for men to learn, which is stop talking. Don't talk when you're mad, because if your woman is depending on a man for her support in a relationship, and he gets angry and starts saying things, women don't forget it easily. It sticks in them. It's days and days before she can settle down. You know, a guy can sometimes get in an argument and then make love afterwards and the whole thing's fine. You know, it's not that way for women. Women have to lower stress and then romantic feelings can come up. Men lose those romantic feelings. They don't lose the sexual feelings typically until many, many years, and that's typically low testosterone. These are the challenges that we're facing today, is low testosterone in men. And that has a lot to do with just environmental toxicity. Okay, when there's talking, you know, the pesticides in our food, just that, simply that, but the heavy metals and toxicity in the soil now, and the water and the air. When this goes into a man's body or woman's body, it registers as estrogen. It binds to the estrogen receptor sites, which sends a message to a man's brain not to make testosterone. So already we see a huge epidemic of even little boys having low testosterone, which is happening today. Their puberty levels for little boys is now, they're taking on average about 2 years longer to hit puberty. And that's, yeah, it's a big, big problem. And girls, because of the high estrogen levels in the environment, the toxicity registers as estrogen in the body. It's not really estrogen, but the body thinks it is. And then what happens is girls typically 2 years earlier. And so now what we're getting is a level of maturity, whereas a 14-year-old boy, or let's say 16-year-old, he's a 14-year-old, and the girl is a 20-year-old or 18-year-old. So you've got an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, huge difference of maturity. So one of the problems today when it comes to sex and kids is the girls are becoming much more aggressive about relationships, feeling very confident about it, feeling more sexual about it, very hormonal about it, and boys are now backing off from it. So this is different in different parts of the country, but it's now becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Oh, John, Dr. Gray, that's just one of many topics that would be fascinating to dig a lot further into.
Right, that is just one of many, many, and I guess you were asking me about our romantic relationships, and I want to come back to that because I believe, and this is, you know, there's so many different parenting schools and techniques and whatever, and you know, kids are incredibly resilient, but the most important thing from my perspective, although I teach lots of parenting skills and there's so much good stuff to learn, is harmony between mom and dad. Because when mom and dad fight, mom and dad aren't happy with each other, children feel it inside and they act out. So many parents will say this story, well, John, that technique works at home, but what do I do when my child's throwing a tantrum in public? Isn't it interesting how children will do that? It's right when other people are watching, or you're on an airplane, or you're in a grocery store, and your child's in the car, and suddenly they don't get what they want, and they're throwing a big, huge tantrum. What do you do? What do you do? Well, that's an example of when parents are upset inside, okay, because you're more apprehension. You have more apprehension at that time. You have more anxiety. Oh my God, people are watching. Can't you just behave? When the parent is upset inside, the child loses control. Children are like literally still connected to us by an invisible umbilical cord, metaphor, but it's there. And when you're upset inside, your children explode. And how many times have we had the experience where we're having a bad day, and why does a child take that moment to have a bad day as well? Because they will tend to act out our own inner discontent, our own anxieties, our own frustrations. And when mom and dad are not loving each other, there's an underground, there's an undercurrent of tension, of dissatisfaction, of discontent, and children will act out. What do we do about that? Well, certainly the insights in Men Are From Mars help our relationships a lot to do two things. Okay, one thing is to correctly interpret our partner. So I'll give you an example of that, and this will be helpful to people. When a guy comes home and he's a bit stressed, men's biological reaction to stress is to disconnect from estrogen. That's what men do. You can see it happening. They disconnect. They have less emotional reaction when there's minor problems to deal with. So men detach, and when women are under stress, they attach. They experience greater emotion. And there's research showing that for women compared to men, under moderate stress, women have 8 times more blood flow to the emotional part of the brain. It's not that she's too emotional, it's she's normally emotional. That's her normal reaction. And it's not that he's too detached. That's his normal stress reduction technique. So we have to see these as normal, and if we don't, we interpret them in wrong ways. So one interpretation when a guy detaches is he's in his cave. A woman can conclude, he doesn't love me. Okay, he didn't used to do that. He used to always be interested in seeing me. Now he's detaching. What have I done wrong? I haven't done anything wrong. Now defensiveness sets in. But just basically, he doesn't love me. What a stressful belief to have. I'm married to somebody who doesn't love me anymore. I've pushed him away, or he's interested in somebody else, or he's simply lazy and unwilling to help. So if you hold the thought, my husband is unwilling to help, oh my God, your oxytocin levels plummet, because you now feel like you're alone. And how many mothers feel like they're alone? I mean, this is like an epidemic where we just go, oh, I'm alone. There's no support for me. So learning skills to ask for help is very important for modern women. And women generally don't have that instinctively, because women instinctively, if we go by instincts, women naturally help. They see a need and they go after it. Men don't have that instinct. Men have an instinct that says, if I'm needed, let me know, and then I'll help you. But you have to let me know. And you have to let me know that it's important. It's like, you know, men are constantly going, do I have to do that? Do I have to do that? Well, which is more important? So we're very clear about that. So a simple example, I think examples help us understand these things. I was at my ranch, and I have 2 ranch hands, and my wife is coming out of the house, and we're going home, and she generally brings the refrigerator with us when we go to the ranch. So she's coming out of the house with a lot of bags and a little roller thing, and you know, it's too much to carry. She's trying to do it, and she looks over at us big strong men, and she smiles, hi, you know, assuming we're all going to run over and help her. And we all went, hi, and went back to our conversation. Then she says, isn't somebody going to help me? And we all jumped instantly and ran over there. So she knew that these guys just need a little nudging. And that's what women have to realize, is you got to nudge men, but not with judgment, not with criticism, not like, why aren't you automatically helping? If you loved me, if you cared about the family, you would automatically do that. It's that the way you judge whether a man loves you and he's willing to help is how does he respond when you ask for help. And then you have to also learn, how do you respond when he helps? That's like a really, really key thing. And, you know, these are some of the lessons we have to learn. So that's an example of misinterpretation. Another misinterpretation is quite often my wife wants to give me advice, okay? So she wants to say, you should do this, you should do that. And I can take that as criticism, or I can take that as this is what women love to do. You know, she's, I call it the home improvement committee, is that no matter how good things get, women want it to be better. And I help men understand this by saying, don't you want your business always to be more and more successful? There's nothing wrong with that. Well, women always want their relationship to be better and better. So don't take it so personally, and realize that it comes from love. So understanding women, interpreting women correctly is very, very important. Otherwise, men unknowingly feel criticized. Another one is women will talk about what's bothering them, and men misinterpret it and think she's asking for help. And so we always sort of jump in there and say, well, you should do this, and you should do this, and you should do this. And that's generally not what she's asking for. And really what we need to learn as men is, if she's upset or bothered about something, she really has a need to share and connect and feel that closeness with her partner. You don't have to solve the problem. If she wants help solving the problem, hold off until she feels completely heard. That's like a really key thing. And now we know biologically, when women feel heard, their oxytocin levels shoot up. So that's like a really key factor there. So that's interpretation. We want to learn to correctly interpret each other, particularly around these difficult issues. And those are only a few of the issues. But another aspect that's really important is to realize in communication, what message are you giving someone? So much of the time, we just think we assume they're going to hear our best intentions. So maybe you want your partner to change in some way. Would you not leave your t-shirts on the floor as a request? So how you phrase that question can have a huge impact. You could say to him, you know, you're always leaving your t-shirts on the floor. I tripped on them, you know, and that comes across as criticism. So who wants to hear criticism? As opposed to another approach, which would be, hey, John, would you pick up your t-shirts? I'd really appreciate it. It makes the room so nice. And then it's a request. So it's, how is somebody going to hear what you're saying? That's why it's so important with men. I tell men that if you talk when you're angry, you have to realize that very few women will be able to hear you. As soon as a woman hears an angry man, cortisol is released and fight or flight reaction in her goes off, because for thousands of years, for women, if a man is angry, people die. Okay, that's just what it's about. You know, men do violent things when they're angry. Women don't, generally. You may not get sex, but nobody's going to die, generally speaking. But for men, if they get angry, it's a time to take time away, a time to cool off, a time out. That's like such an important thing. And then cool off, and how do you cool off? You literally have to do something to raise your testosterone levels back up again. Because whenever a man gets angry, this is very interesting, his testosterone is converting into estrogen. He's becoming feminized. He's feeling his emotions too much. So anger is a defensive reaction inside of men. Hormonally, what happens is testosterone converts into estrogen. And then estrogen, men cannot handle those kind of strong emotions because men tend to react with action rather than with words. And so it's a very scary thing for women, whether they know it or not, and most women will acknowledge it, when a man gets angry. And sometimes they'll even say you're yelling, and he doesn't even think he's yelling, but it's just the tone in his voice is mean, because anger focuses a man's energy, and he means what he says, but quite often he can't logically think at those times. And he'll take action. So you'll see, I mean, so much research backs this up, but here's one which is very interesting for us with our children, is for boys, when they become too emotional, too much estrogen, what's happening now is we've got 6 times more boys, young men, committing suicide than girls. 6 times more. As teenagers, 4 times more. As children, the same. So what we're seeing is when boys get angry, they take action, and they do it without thinking. And, you know, even so many times when they see the tire tracks, when somebody, you know, drives off a cliff or something to commit suicide, there's still the brakes. At the last minute, they'll brake when they realize, oh, my God, what's happening? But guys can tend to be way too impulsive when they get angry, so they have to learn to control those impulses. And once again, that comes back to that most important lesson, which is delayed gratification. Learn that you don't have to have everything right away. And people who don't have that, they throw tantrums and they get upset when they don't get what they want right now.
just so many things I'd like to pick up on. And one, when you talked about the whole issue with suicide and that increasing, I know another thing I've heard you talk about that is so profound is, you know, how men and women, how dads and moms affect the chemistry of our kids or the hormones differently, and therefore how that affects things like ADHD and things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, please?
Oh gosh, I'd love to talk about that. That's really the focus of my most recent book, which is Staying Focused in a Hyper World, Natural Solutions for ADHD, Memory and Brain Performance. And, you know, most people don't realize that there's a lot of different contributing factors to this phenomenon of ADHD. And the bonding with our parents has a definite, provable indication. I would also add other contributing factors. You bring a lot of factors together. You have psychology and you have diet, basically, and biology. If you look at children with ADHD all the way up to autism spectrum, they all have indigestion problems. Okay, so they've got gut problems. And that gut problem could be due to stress in the home. It could be the stress of a breakup. They're showing that after divorce, there's way more ADHD. They're also showing with little boys, which is where the ADHD is most high, three times more boys with ADHD, which is a huge difference, 5 times more boys with autism, which is a huge difference, is that when boys are with fathers, dopamine gets produced. When boys are with mothers, serotonin gets produced. And dopamine, inhibited dopamine function is really the cause of ADHD. Dopamine gives you focus, motivation, energy. It keeps you from being distracted. It keeps you from being restless. It keeps you from being overly sensitive. This is too much. And it also, for some children, keeps them from being perfectionists. Dopamine can make you more flexible moving. Because for some children, and this is undiagnosed generally, but one form of ADHD in some children is hyper compulsiveness, hyper perfectionist. Everything has to be a certain way. That is the same condition in one child, in the brain, the same condition in another, which is hypersensitivity, crying too much, being fussy, getting upset too much. And then there's another hyper state, which is hyperactive, which is they're just running, bouncing off the walls. Okay, we know those children. And then there's the hyper-distracted child. You know, they just start something and they do something else and they can't finish something, they can't remember something, they're always disorganized and so forth. Now, these are different temperaments of children, but the condition that creates that is a hyper-distraction, a hyperactive, a hypersensitive, a hyper-compulsive. There's nothing wrong with those temperaments, but when they're hyper, then it creates problems. And the hyperness can come from inhibited dopamine function in boys, of not having enough time with a male mentor, parent, guide, father, so to speak. And because, see, when you're with your mom, and they can see this with little children, when mom comes in, they settle down. It's like my wife used to complain because she'd be putting the kids to bed, and I'd come in, and they get all excited again. You know, Dad is fun and jumping up and down and all that stuff. How the kids get to go to sleep? You know, it's just a natural reaction. Is the boy tends to relate more to the dopamine in the dad and the serotonin, which is soothing and comforting as well. And we as children, when we're children, we need a balance of both stimulation. We need both stimulation. So when we're not getting the normal stimulation of dad, we seek other forms of dopamine stimulation. And da-da-da-da, TV comes along, and we get addicted to TV. And then ta-da-da-da, iPads come along, which is maybe 5 times more dopamine stimulating than TV. So what's happening to our kids today is they're getting truly addicted to their iPads, to their electronic stimulation, because it's the opposite of delayed gratification. It's instant gratification. I want something, I get it. You know, I think back to our days when we had the 8-track tapes, you know. If you wanted to get to a song on an album, you had to wait through the whole thing. You know, you're waiting and waiting and waiting, but you learn how to wait. Kids today, they don't have to wait. They get it right away. And then you get into a video game where you've got such fast action, fast stimulation, fast reaction. What you're doing is pumping up dopamine levels literally to a super high level. Kind of like the same thing happens in the same part of the brain as when you take cocaine, video games, and carbohydrate sugars and desserts. I mean, think about the things we do, we want to eat when we're stressed to make us feel good. Often it's sugars and cupcakes and chips and bread and those, you know, what moms used to do in the past, which was our version of video games then, which was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which would raise the blood sugars really high for a while, make a lot of dopamine. And I'm not against those sandwiches, by the way, but we just have to be careful these days how much sugar we give to our kids, because it has the same effect of this high dopamine. So let me paint the picture now, just sum that up. What is the problem with stimulating the brain with higher levels of dopamine? The problem is, as soon as you get high levels, you go, wow, I really like that, but the brain says that's too much. And the brain actually downregulates or makes neurons to disappear. The dopamine receptors disappear. So let's give a study on this. If somebody took a shot of cocaine, which is like Ritalin, and a big dose of dopamine, right away, within 1 day, you lose 30% of your neurons in your brain that have to do with dopamine. So that's how profound it is. Now, they can come back, but you have to go through the withdrawal symptoms. You have to stop giving yourself the high dopamine stimulation, and then the brain will go, oh, where's the dopamine? And it will start making the little receptor sites again, and they'll come back in a few days. And so it will come back. For cocaine, it takes about a month, but it will come back if you have the right nutrition to help your body make it come back. So that's nutrition comes into here, abstinence comes into here. But what's the problem with that? Hey, my child's restless, they're misbehaving, let me just give them a video game or watch this TV show, and that's a great babysitter. Well, what just happened is you're now creating high dopamine levels in that child, so that downregulates the dopamine receptor sites, and now normal dopamine stimulation doesn't provide pleasure. So what used to be the highest pleasure for a child, if they've never been exposed to sugar or TV, and I'm not saying that's possible, but if a child's never been exposed to sugar or TV, that kind of electric stimulation or computers, what would happen then is the most powerful dopamine stimulator would be a mother's smile, a father being proud of you. So the motivator for children in previous generations was pleasing your parents. And then the only dysfunction you have is if you can't please your parents, and that's a problem. But if you have parents that you can please, you're a healthy, happy kid, okay? That's all it takes is please your teacher, please your parents, and you're really doing good. But today, pleasing your parents only produces this much dopamine, but a video game can produce this much dopamine. So this is like background noise. So we'll see the practical application of this now as we say to our kids, we want them to eat their vegetables. We can't just say, I want you to eat your vegetables. We have to say, if you eat your vegetables, then you'll get your cocaine, which is the sugar. Or if you do what I say, then you can play your video game later. If you do your homework, then you get to play on the video game. Everything is based upon a reward of cocaine as opposed to the reward of it will make me happy and I'll be proud of you. We will be a family. That's what we do as a family, is we share responsibilities. You know, these kind of conversations have less and less effect on a child's brain when he's overstimulated with all these other things.
That is crazy. And when you put it that way, I haven't actually heard you put it quite that way before. Like, you just got me in a different way. The whole thing that our kids were really supposed to, our boys were supposed to get that hit and from just pleasing us. So no wonder parenting's so profoundly different. Do you want to speak a little bit, and I do want to speak specifically about the 5 major messages from your book, Children Are From Heaven, but everything you're saying is parenting related, and I am going to recommend again to people to go to marsvenus.com. I'm also going to recommend you listen to this again and again because the insights are profound. But so how do we reverse that? And we're having that type of challenge with our boys.
Well, okay, so there's good parenting skills, and you just asked for 5 good messages, and I'd like to get to that. But once a child's brain is addicted to high stimulation, they can't even hear those messages. I mean, they're not going to have the same impact. So how do you open a child's brain to love again from the parent as opposed to the stimulation because they love their video and they love their desserts? And so what we have to recognize is the remedy for this, which is it's often diagnosed as ADHD. It could be these other conditions I just talked about as well. And parents are being told by doctors that you can take Ritalin and Adderall and there's no side effects, and for many children it helps. And for many children it does help for a few years, but there are side effects. And that's what they're not telling parents, and they don't know that. It's more recent research after this has been around for a while. Harvard University has shown that brain injury occurs when you take Ritalin or Adderall or ADHD drugs. And it will affect you the rest of your life if you don't heal that injury. So one thing is you can heal it. That's my message. They don't have studies proving that yet. They say it's permanent. I don't see it as permanent. That's one. And two is when you're in the media and with doctors, you only hear two solutions: parenting skills, which I always am behind, and the drugs. They sort of say either take the drugs or use these parenting skills. Take the drugs or use these parenting skills. Well, guess what? There's other options. There's parenting skills, and there's dietary changes, and there's nutritional supplementation. And I'm a big fan of nutritional supplementation because quite often parents don't have the discipline for the dietary changes. so, you can move in the direction of a good diet as best you can, but you're sending your kids to another child's house. They're going to eat cookies and ice cream. So it's the world we live in. So at least we can supplement the body with the things that are missing and that will help the body to re-heal itself. So in my book, I listed 8 different nutritional supplements that are at health food stores that have research on them. There's basically the ones I listed have research saying that those supplements have been proven to be equally effective to Adderall and Ritalin, but they have no side effects. I mean, wouldn't you want something that has no side effects, doesn't change the brain in any way, but helps your body to heal itself of these conditions? Now, the reason why I see it's not 100% improvement with all these things is because it's not just the nutrition, it's also the parenting skills. And one of the most important parenting skills is don't let your children run the show and have as much playtime with sugar and with video games as they want. It needs to be all in moderation, good diet and moderation. But I think we're getting to the point where parents have to realize fast foods are just not good for your kids. We need to start learning how to cook at home and with healthy foods if possible. That makes all the difference. For some children, we need to cut out bread completely. It's just shown that for some children, if they get sunshine and cut out bread, that enough has caused ADHD to disappear. One of my favorite simple supplements is just simply getting a vitamin, a full spectrum vitamin supplement, B vitamins particularly in there, along with vitamin D and vitamin C, and then take an extra dose of vitamin C and grapeseed extract. So multivitamin, high dose of vitamin C and grapeseed extract, having huge benefits. Sometimes just simply upping the omega-3 has been proven to be effective as Ritalin and Adderall for certain children. But many children can't absorb, with ADHD, can't absorb the omega-3, and they need L-carnitine, another amino acid. Now, in most cases, why do you need any of these supplements? Because you have gut problems, and they've proven this to be the case. And that's due to antibiotics. Children who've had earaches a lot, and they got antibiotics, that will often interfere with digestion. Now, why does it interfere with digestion? Because part of digestion is based upon something called the microbiome. The microbiome is now being written about in just the last 2 years. It's another brain that's in our gut. It's in our intestines. It's 2 pounds. It's actually an organ. And the antioxidant, when we take antibiotics, that kills parts of the microbiome that will never be replaced unless we take probiotics to replace those missing good bacteria, the good bacteria, the probiotics in our gut. So we have to replace it. And children who, cesarean babies sometimes don't get that as well. There's lots of studies showing to different degrees higher vulnerability to ADHD. Also, when your child has a fever, if you take fever suppressants, that can also be associated with killing the microbiome and inhibiting the body's ability to protect itself from toxicity. When you take, for example, acetaminophen, which is 600 over-the-counter drugs, acetaminophen suppresses the liver's ability to make glutathione. Now, glutathione, there's 100,000 studies showing that any brain problem is associated with low glutathione. That's why one of my favorite remedies that doesn't have, well, it does have some research on it, which is simply what's called undenatured whey protein. Undenatured whey protein has been proven to increase glutathione levels 400%. And what happens for children with ADHD, a good morning shake, you can make a superfood shake with some of these things, vitamin C and goji berries, undenatured whey protein, some omega-3, some oils put in there. You have a mixture which will immediately improve brain function. You know, I have a premix at my website, and kids, my grandkids, they want grandpa's shake. It makes them happy. It's very low sugar. It's a teaspoon of sugar, and they feel like it's fantastic. They want it because it nourishes the brain. So there's other, phosphatidylserine is something in the health food stores that probably one of the most popular supplements that help the brain, the memory in the brain. For some of these kids, their brains slow down and they can't remember things as well. Others, their brains speed up too much and they remember too much. But the phosphatidylserine is a substance that's in egg yolks. Egg yolks is one of the healthiest things for our children and for ourselves to cope with stress. And the reason that's important to say, people always say egg yolks, but then suddenly cholesterol becomes this scare. And Harvard has done this 3 studies showing eating egg yolks, several eggs a day, has never increased anybody's cholesterol level. And the cholesterol, which is in egg yolks, is necessary to make the hormones to keep us in balance and also necessary to make brain chemicals. So there's a lot of extra little tips that people can do. And, you know, some parents will think, well, I eat bread. Why can't my children eat bread? Well, because children today have compromised digestion. This is just what's happened. Due to antibiotics for several generations, we have compromised digestion. And bread is hard to digest. The gluten in bread is hard to digest. Manufacturing processes have changed in the last 20 years in various ways to speed up the process of making the bread, which makes the bread have more gluten, and gluten is harder to digest. So indigestion, once again, inhibits brain function. These brains are both connected, the head brain and the gut brain. So my favorite probiotic is that, you know, you can get standard probiotics in yogurt, which is free probiotics, and that's helpful. There's some probiotics that have up to 40 different strains of probiotics to restore the microbiome that you make in homemade yogurt. I teach parents on my website how to make this homemade yogurt. It's called Bravo. But you can make yogurt for your children, and it will help their gut, and you'll see so many healthy conditions, health conditions improve by restoring the gut. So that's enough on nutrition, but there's a lot of that information on my website or in the books, Staying Focused. And your listeners can get a free copy of the book if they go to my website. So that would be a great thing.
Oh, fantastic, because yes, people are asking about details, and I just thought it was so important. Your work has such breadth, and it's really, this is critical information that you're getting out to parents. So I know our time is running short, and we really want to talk about those 5 messages, because that's a really key of your teaching around parenting.
Yeah, so the first message is okay to be different. One of the challenges for kids in a family is they're being compared to other family members. Every child has their own strengths and weaknesses. And it's so easy for parents to say, well, why can't you be like so-and-so, or why aren't you this way, or why don't you look like this, and why don't you do that? Comparing is not a good thing. And if we look at ourselves as adults, when do we suffer the most? When am I suffering the most? Usually I'm comparing myself to somebody. I say, they have more money than me. They're smarter than me. They did better than me. They did this. That car is better than my car. I picked the wrong one because that one's a better one. This comparing tendency, really, it's a nature, but we don't have to exaggerate it by having parents comparing us to somebody else. And as far as comforting parents, if you look at any of not that every child has to be a superstar, but if you look at every superstar in the world, they're very unique. They're very different. You know, what comes to mind is like a Michael Jackson or a Sting, And I remember I watched The Voice sometimes for the music shows, and they always say what makes someone really popular is a distinctive, unique voice. So people hear that, they know it's that person. So, you know, our tendency is we want our children to conform, to be like everybody else. But if you want your child's greatness to come out, it's more challenging because they're going to be stronger, but they're unique beings. Let that uniqueness come out. Every child has a unique talents to come forth, but they have to be nurtured. And you know, we can't put them there, but we can certainly interfere with them coming forth. So the first part is that you're okay the way you are. You know, you don't have to be like somebody else. So that's a very important message. Second one is that it's okay to have emotions. Quite often parents want to immediately make their children wrong for being upset about things, for crying, for being afraid. Don't be afraid, just do it. You know, some children are not like other children. There's 3 different learning styles for children. One is children who sort of just take one step at a time. They're always moving forward. Another type of child basically gets things right away. They're like the genius child. They get things right away. And another type of child sits and waits, and they wait. They have to see everything. They have to take it in, and then boom, then they get it right away. It's like Einstein didn't talk for the first 7 years of his life, just waiting, taking it all in, and boom, comes out and has genius behaviors. And it doesn't mean that those 3 styles are going to show up in every case. So it may be in social situations, one child wants to sit and watch. Another one would be jumping in right away. Another one would be, well, I'll slowly get into it. So this is we have to realize learning styles are different, and that's okay to be different. And then when you're being pushed or you're not getting what you want, you get upset and emotional. So we as adults, when we don't get what we want, we get upset. But what do? We don't throw a tantrum in public. Well, how do we teach a child not to throw a tantrum in public? We have to be the safety around them to say, it's okay. You can have those feelings. I understand what you're feeling. You're not wrong for it. And eventually you'll get what you want, but this is not the right time. It's not the appropriate place. But not to make the emotions wrong. Emotions are okay, but you can't control the world with your emotions. So, but basically, I'm here to help you understand your emotions. So parents learn to make emotions okay. A third message is okay to want more. Wanting more is natural, and so a child says, I want that. Well, you shouldn't want that. That's selfish. You know, a child eats the whole pie. How could you eat the whole pie? So well, I wanted to eat it. You don't make the child wrong for wanting more. You say, I understand you want the whole pie. Sometimes I want the whole pie, but we have a family. We have to share. We have to think of others. So next time, let's make sure everybody gets theirs. So you don't want to shame a child for being different, for having emotions, for wanting more. Wanting more is natural. You know, my daughter says, oh, I want when she was 14, she was going to get her license soon, and she saw a Corvette, red Corvette, convertible. I want that car. Boy, can I have that when I get my license? I said, you look great in that car. Wow, that's such a neat-looking car. But I don't think you're going to get it when you get your license. But maybe one day if you want it, you can get it. So it's not to stomp on somebody's dreams and make them wrong for wanting more. Now here's the 4th message, which is so critical. It's okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are natural. Mistakes are normal. We all make them. I make them. Your mother makes them. You know, we learn from them. We don't want to make mistakes, but nobody wants to, but that's how we learn and grow. So how does a child get the message that it's okay to make mistakes? Well, if you're disappointed with your child, feeling discouraged with your child, feeling bad about your child making mistakes or wanting them to feel bad about it, you're giving them the message you shouldn't make mistakes. So it's complicated. I mean, we don't want to make mistakes, but if we make mistakes, that's normal, that's human. Now we need forgiveness, we need empathy, we need understanding, we need opportunity. And then there's the whole thing about, well, you know, if I make mistakes and I get punished, then now I'm afraid to tell you I make mistakes. So now I have to hide my mistakes from you. And now I have shame around myself. And so there's this, anything a child feels I can't share with my parents, that child is now disconnecting from their parents. Once a child has to hide their mistakes from their parents, then when the parent does say, I love you so much, you're wonderful, inside the child there's a feeling like, yeah, but if you knew that I stole the cookie from the cookie jar, then you wouldn't love me. So a parent can love the child, but then the child doesn't feel loved. And I saw this in therapy so many times, that love could not get in to the child, because love is what tells us that we're okay, we're different, we're unique, our feelings are okay, it's okay to want more, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be a human being. So there's all kinds of ways of you know, it's not like you can't give your children consequences for things, but, you know, I'm in the camp of your children. First, you understand, you try to teach your children, but if your children don't cooperate with you, you do have timeouts. And I do have many skills in the book that you can do long before you do timeouts, but timeouts are an important consequence when children are not cooperating. I also tell parents, you know, and never, here's just a little tip, but it's a useful one. Mothers have this automatic reaction often. They want to say, "You're not listening." Now, you're not listening. You didn't listen to me. So suddenly listening has a different meaning other than listening. It means you're not obeying me. Because that's really what she's saying.
Right.
You're not obeying me. So rather than saying, and whenever you give a child you don't do something, energy gets blocked. It doesn't really do much. It's okay to do a bit, but it doesn't have a huge effect. What has a better effect is telling your children what you want. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. This is what will make me feel good. This is what we like to do. This is what we do as a family. So rather than say you're not listening, instead, and if it pops out, that's okay. You're not listening. I want you to cooperate. See, that's a very powerful phrase. It hits the deepest chord inside of human nature, is that to survive, we need cooperation. And you need the parents' cooperation, otherwise you won't survive. So the parents saying, I want you to cooperate. So every time you're not listening, you're not obeying, you come and you'll hit another nerve with that child when you say, I want you to cooperate. Also, yelling at your children typically doesn't work. They shut down even more. You can actually become a little more quiet, and you'll get their attention quite often better. But telling a child what you want, what you like, is a key aspect. And the fifth message, after it's okay to want more, is it's okay to resist mom and dad, but we're the boss. And I'm very clear about that, because once you get into a lot of these other nurturing techniques, you can go too far that way, and the child rules the family. There's got to be clarity that the parent is the authority. And you're living in my house, you'll follow my rules, that kind of a thing. They say, why? Because I'm the parent. That's it. End of story. Mothers have to know. You don't have to say, you don't have to give 50 reasons to justify what you want. Basically, this is what I want you to do. But why? But why? Because I'm the parent. That's why. And that's a good enough answer. It's okay to resist. I'm not gonna be like back in the days in Germany before Hitler. They found out that one of the reasons that caused people to surrender to a dictator was the parents used dictator parenting skills. You'll do what I say or else. And do not be upset. Do what I say. Are we having fun now? Let's have fun. We're not having fun. You know, you can't dictate to children like that, but you can still be the leader. And a leader who earns the respect of their children is one who gives love to their children, but doesn't give up their power to simply appease their children.
Oh, Dr. Gray, that's a perfect place to end. We've come to the end of our time. And I will, again, the website is marsvenus.com, so MARSVENUS. You'll see I have a pen in my hand because I take some limited notes. I just recommend listening to this again and again. Thank you so much for being on the show today. And if you've got a last comment you want to leave us with, that would be great. And then I'll take care of some housekeeping after you're gone.
Well, my last comment is I think everybody listening to your show, parenting is the most important thing in the world as far as I'm concerned. You know, the world is dependent on us parents, and children are a new generation. They're very different today, and we need to adapt our parenting skills. Usually what is automatic is not going to work necessarily. We have to learn new skills. Another just last message is a little patience with your children, because they take longer to mature the more enlightened they are. So if you're an enlightened parent, your child will take more time to mature. The more evolved a species is, the longer they take to mature. The new 21 is actually 28. What we're seeing now is children who've been well parented with a lot of love and they feel safe to be themselves. They develop more of who they can be, and their unique self comes forth, but it takes longer. If you take a child at 12 years old and throw them out of the house, they'll become a 28-year-old in maturity overnight, but they'll miss 14 years of maturity. So just to be patient with your children, if it seems like they're needing to be coddled a little bit more when they're 18 or 19, that's because you did such a good job as a parent.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. So many nuggets. So Thanks very, very much. Have a fantastic day, and I look forward to, well, even hearing all the comments from people, all the insights. So
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
thank you. Bye for now. So first off, the replay will be up by tomorrow. You'll get an email out with all of the details. And I will, yeah, you'll get all that information if you are already a GPS for Parents member, or if you have purchased the recordings, you will get that information as well. Couple other things that if you do want to invite others, greatparentingshow.com is perfect to send people to. And this is only the second interview in our fall series, and already I know that this is transformational for what it can do for you. If you have questions, I am going to stay on here for a few minutes and direct you to some different things. I also want to just look at some of the questions that come up. And so I will say, though, goodbye for now for the regular broadcast, and then we'll kind of break out into the Q&A. And as part of saying goodbye for now, as always, I want to thank you all for being the change that we all want to see in the world. Everything you do as a parent ricochets out everyone that your kids interact with over the course of their lifetime. You will make a profound difference. And of course, really, the most important thing, though, is that you'll have the family life that you want, that your family will thrive, not just survive. So thank you for taking the time, whether live or by replay, and bye for now.